do whatever it takes to have what I want now and worry about the consequences later. But that's just an endless cycle of chasing tail and violating the number one rule of wealth creation, which is demonstrating on a consistent, regular basis that you can spend less than you earn.
90% lend, for example, you're redlining a motor vehicle, $1,500 a month, and that car's not going to be worth what it is in 4 or 5 years' time, plus a balloon payment at the end of that.
Most of us are trained to work for money, and very few of us have any conversations around having money work for us. Because if I have good credit, I can then go and borrow for a bigger house, I can borrow for a car, I can get on credit cards, I can do store cards. The whole mantra of the middle class is to have good credit. The rich people, they don't work for money, they have their money working for them. So it's actually just a paradigm shift that the majority of us don't make. So the fact that we are all being encouraged to work for money, get into debt, and pay it off as quickly as we can. That's the narrative. That's the mass conversations.
G'day everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I think we're joined by podcast royalty today. I've called you guys VIPs.
Must be you.
Very important podcasters. I did come up with that.
Hey,
Bryce Holdaway Ben Kingsley, welcome onto the show. How you guys doing?
Thanks for having
we're
us.
great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys. I'm going to start by saying thank you. I will never forget listening to the Property Couch many, many years ago. And I think we were just talking before you guys up to like episode officially like 550, unofficially 700 and something.
But who's counting?
Yeah, who's counting? But guys, I want to say like, what a journey. Like, honestly, I admire what you guys have put in and you're still showing up. It's incredible.
Thank you, mate. I remember saying to Ben, look, I want to do this thing called a podcast. He goes, a what? And it didn't take much convincing.
A radio show.
and then our podcast is a trio. We've got Ivis behind the scenes, and we just went to her and said, hey, listen, do you know how to do a podcast? And she goes, no, but leave it with me. And then a day later she comes back and she goes, I've worked it out. And then from there we went in. But
Awesome.
to say that we were here a decade later,
Yeah.
I didn't expect that to be. I had no expectation of what to expect. It was, we were early to the game. There's only a handful of others there before, but now it's been good.
I can tell you it motivates us, right? Because we know that there's a community of people out there that love hearing what we have to say and we love educating people.
Yeah.
So off the back of that, that's, it inspires us. It's certainly the best time of the week for us in terms of being able to sort of get what we've got in terms of foundational stuff, but also something new that we want to talk to.
Yeah.
It just inspires us to be better.
But you'll know yourself, right? When you've got this platform, you have to sharpen up. You have to really dial into your message and get really clear on the way that you, teach the audience your frameworks. And so it actually we get more out of it than our audience.
Spot on.
Because we just can't keep showing up and saying the same thing over and over. We have to look for new and unique ways to refine what we know and say what we know. And that's been an enormous learning curve for us. And mate, that's been the best byproduct, I've got to say.
Well said. Well said. I think that's what happens. You get a bit of a following. Now it creates a little bit of responsibility. But I think the point there is it keeps you super, super accountable going. You got to keep fresh. You got to keep relevant, which means your finger on the pulse, reading the AFR, going, well, yeah, what's coming out? You're watching out for media reports and industry, goings on, so you can be at the forefront of that as well. Not to champion you guys, but to champion the message and the community that you're serving as well. So
yeah, when you're a kid, we're going as an adult, we're going against what we were taught as kids, because all through our primary school and our high school, what were we taught? We were taught to put our hands over our answers and not let the person next door to us copy. Whereas early days in the podcast, we were like, well, come and have a look at our answers and copy us. And if you like what we do it. And so it was kind of counterbalanced to what we thought. And I must admit at the time, I had this insecurity of like, if we continue to give away everything we know, because early days we just thought, that's it.
Absolutely. Super generous, like your knowledge at the start. Yeah.
Well, we might as well take the shingle out from the front door, shut down the lease, take down the signage, because no one's going to come to us. But then, you've since learned that the biggest thing is to teach the what, and then people will come to you for the how, and for those who want it done for them. So it's been a journey. It's been a learning curve. Back then, there wasn't many people to. Everyone's a podcaster now, but back then, there was only a handful of us.
Yeah, correct. So if you're listening, and I think some people are far too young to know your origin story, the Property Couch is your podcast. Empower Wealth is your business. I think one thing that also strikes me for you guys is there's a great dynamic, like any type of business relationship. Obviously, I'm in partnership with my wife, and that has its own, dynamic to it as well. My brother-in-law, but for you guys, obviously being in business together, growing this, it's obviously a testament to the work you've put in your own like professional relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's a credit to this guy because I was in an audience when Ben was talking.
Yeah.
And I'd been involved in the industry since 1998, and Ben and I, that was probably around 2000 and maybe late 11, early 12. And I just remember sitting in the audience going, there's something different about the way that Ben presents, the information that he portrays and the way that he does it. Because I'd seen a lot. I grew up in Perth. I'd been to the Gold Coast. I'd seen a lot, having started in the game in 1998. So I think that was the attraction. Ben and I had a coffee. We chatted about a mutual interest. And then he'd been sort of this professor in the lab in the back room saying, mate, you like property. I like property. Let me show you what I've been working on. And so he had this spreadsheet that he was working on. And he goes, come over and have a look. So I went around to his office at the time. We'd met in a cafe in Melbourne, invited me around to the office, and he showed me what he and Michael Pope, who was one of our business partners who's recently passed on, they'd been working on. And I remember going home to my wife. I can still remember to this day just going, that is the missing piece. Like rewind back then, right? We're talking, well over a decade ago. What most people were doing in the property investing game was going, you've got an income, you've got some equity, let's buy a property. Whereas Ben had gone through and meticulously worked out how many properties do I need and actually had some science and a process behind that. And I remember saying to my wife, I've got to do whatever it takes to collaborate with Ben because what he's doing is unique and different. So it's kind of that common interest and then just that sort of nutty professor stuff that we like to try and work out how to get to the detail that really started the bond, and then we've been in business ever since.
I think it took me a long time to work out, but I love helping people, and now I've worked out I like building things that help people. And so the simulator that we talk about there that helps optimize cash flows to work out what the tolerance is in terms of what you can actually achieve, and now with the More platform, it's an evolution of that. The money smart systems, all the frameworks that we've got in the new book. All of those things are just about helping people understand how to do things, and then we educate people in terms of how that make it happen.
Excellent. You mentioned your new book, and if you're watching, you'll see it here on screen, How to Retire on $3,000 a Week, which is your updated version to your last book, which is How to Retire on $2,000 a Week, which I'm going to come back to in a second. Yeah. But one thing that I picked up from the start from listening to you guys early on was you coined words then that it's now truly vernacular in the industry. I'll talk about one. So you talk about investment grade properties at the start. No one's really owning that space. And then investment savvy broker. And I remember at the start, people would drop us emails going, are you guys investment savvy brokers? I'm like, we absolutely are. Sitting off the same hymn sheet. And that takes a lot of work to actually change how people approach their portfolio to their team of professionals as well. But it must be really fun to look back on and going, we kind of started that movement and that shift in terms of how people approach their journey, isn't it?
It is fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think Bryce coined investment savvy broker, but I don't think I can claim the investment grade. I think that was Greville Paps that I originally heard it from. I think so. I don't want to take credit for things.
Claiming fame, but maybe you just got
when we do things, I'll happily take credit.
But you hear people say location does 80% of the heavy lifting, right? Yeah. They'll whenever they say something that we were
appeal, those things
early part of that was why we started the podcast. We a lot of people start podcasts now because they are really powerful marketing tools for their message and their community. And we can honestly tell you that we didn't know what we were doing. Like we weren't ignorant. Like we were running a business and maybe this would help, but there was no playbook. There was no run sheet. We didn't know if we were getting our competitors on early thinking, oh, are we doing the right or wrong thing? Like it's just, we just had a swing. And as it turns out, we did quite a few things right, but it was through accident, not through planning. But as we look back in the revision mirror, it's kind of nice to hear you say that, and you know yourself. For us, it's Ben and I on 2 microphones for 10 years. We don't get to talk to the people. So when we bump into you, or we talk to someone at a show, or someone will bump us into the street and they'll share some of that dialogue. That's really rewarding.
It's spot on. It's I tell this to everyone that reaches out the back of this. Like, this is a one-way conversation. When people come off active listening, then have a proper conversation, I'm blown away, because now the invisible becomes really tangible. You get to see people's stories, hear what they're looking to do, find out that they've gone and listened to numerous episodes and spent that many hours educating themselves. You want to return serve by going, I'll give you everything I physically can, because you've committed and given us so much of your time, which is probably the most important resource that everyone has as well.
Yeah, I think abundance is an important thing, right? Like, I think if you have a mindset of abundance, you get that law of reciprocity that comes back to you. So, when we started getting some of these guests on, I met those people because I was the chair of PIPA, the Property Investment Professionals of Australia, which had a really clear mandate around how to look after customers with their money. And so you get to meet all these really great people, and you see how they're doing it. And so you work out who the spruikers are in the industry and who are the people to be trusted. And obviously your business has come along since that time. And so off the back of that, we still work that mandate, like there is enough business out there for those people to be able to go and see the right type of people, whether they're local or nowadays with obviously online meetings and so forth, you can meet anyone. But I think it really is important, because the vast majority of the people back when we were fixing bad haircuts were getting really bad investment advice around buying house and land packages that are off the plan. And we've definitely seen, that shift change to people understanding the dynamics of how to get a return on property, and have moved to existing and understand land to asset ratio and understand all of the really important things that move the dial in terms of long-term investing returns.
Beautiful. So what's inspired the update? Because my first inclination to go is retiring on $2,000 a week. Like, are you selling yourself a little bit short, or is it not enough to then go, now we need $3,000? What's been the inspiration to increase our retire your week number by?
Well, there's a number of elements of that, but the genesis of the 2,000 a week is Effie Zahos asked us to write a cover story for the Money magazine. She said our highest selling cover is how to retire on 1,000 a week, and we've gone, oh cool, we could do that. And she goes, can you double it? And we're like, to 2,000 a week? I'm like, yeah, because this is back in 2013. Yeah. And then she rings up and she goes, actually, can you make it 2.5? And we're like, oh, okay. So we got Michael, got Ben, we got together, we did the plans, we worked it out, and we did that for the cover story. Well, she rings and says, hey, look, this is now the second highest cover story we've ever sold across all of our masthead, across all of our Money magazine platform. And I'm like, all right, Ben, clearly this is a hook that works, right? So when we wrote our first book, didn't know what we were doing. So we just by accident, well, not by accident, but it was more about the armchair guide to property investing. And then we thought, we better have a subline, how to retire on 2,000 a week. And that was an iteration of passive income. Like, we went through many iterations, and then we used the word retire because that was the common word that everyone had at the time.
And at the time, Daniel and Rebecca, which is one of the examples that we use in a lot of our training modules, that was vigorously researched in terms of the typical household in Melbourne at that time. And so the 2,000 a week was effectively around that $100,000 that was around a 20 or a 30% premium on what the typical household was spending with two kids. So we went deep on the ABS data in terms of household spending and all of that time to try and get a good idea. And it just so happened to land, around that sort of 100,000, and then, we built to 2.5 or whatever that was. But, and now, where we are today is indexation and inflation. Ultimately that's still $3,000 in today's dollar terms. But remember, 2000 in 2015 was relative. Now you will need to have a little bit more because your money doesn't buy you as much as what it did 10 years ago.
Yeah, cool. So does that mean, I guess, for anyone thinking about the future, do they need to have a buffer that it's going to maybe we make this 4K at some point as well, future planning, going where your dollars will sit at some point?
So net present value is effectively the theory here. So for the listening audience, effectively that's in today's dollar terms. But when we build out the case studies at the back of the book, they actually relate to what that will be in future value with a 3% indexation.
Beautiful.
So the message here is that's today's dollars.
Yep.
And, as you build out that future passive income, you'll get a $3,000 annuity that's relevant to that. So it might be, in 2050 or something like that, it might be $4,300 as an example, in a weekly allowance that you would take off the back of the portfolio that you built.
Awesome.
One of the mistakes that we made in the first book too is we baked in prices. So you don't know that when you're a first time author, but it's like, here's the prices. So as we're still using that book, it's getting a bit long in the tooth. You could still buying stuff in for 300,000, buying stuff in locations you could get possibly now. So it was kind of like, well, we need to update that. And then we wrote that first book before we did the podcast. So there's 10 years of frameworks and interviews and sharpening the saw and getting clearer in our message. And then ultimately what started as a revised and updated edition, by the time we got to the end of the writing process and in chatting with the publisher, it was like, no, this is clearly standalone. There is a little bit of crossover, but generally speaking, it's new content presented in a new way.
Yeah, very structured.
And for anyone who's a property investor, as I say, you can read that book and get all the way to the case studies, and then it applies to every property investor. And then from the case studies forward, we're clearly advocates of passive property investing for the majority of people. So from the case studies forward, that's for passive. But you could be an active investor and get all the way up to the case studies, and it still applies, because we've gone super hard on helping the reader understand the basics of the Australian property market, so that they can make better decisions on where to buy and how many to buy. So we're kind of really proud of the fact that the first book was very evergreen. I'm finding it, I'll be interesting to see if we pick this book up in 10, 15 years' time, where the edges were that weren't evergreen, but I'm thinking that it should stand the test of time for the next 50 years.
The principles will hold true, I'd say. And I think the big part that I love and resonate with is the mindset piece. And I think we spoke earlier about, we'll see it in our own client base, for example, the ones that had the potential that have somehow fallen off, the ones that have the potential that need a little bit of a push and nudge, and the ones that have gone on to create some amazing portfolios. And it's a bit of bell curve sometimes as well when you look at your client base. And even then you have the numbers here around, the percentage of investors that go on to build, the 1% portfolios as well. So very curious to see what are some of the hallmarks, what's some of the early signs that you see from investors that, these guys are going somewhere, versus the ones that lose some steam or fall off the wagon a little bit.
Yeah, for mine, there's a couple of things that I always try to do. If I was going to see a doctor, I would want to basically make sure that, before they wrote a script for me, that they would have some understanding of my current health. Yeah. So whether they've done blood tests on me and blood pressure tests and all of these other, they might have done bone densities or MRI, all of a sudden I then get a clearer picture of the household. Off the back of that, what we're then trying to do is work out what the wealth gap is. So in terms of the conversations you want to be having is around understanding whether they're problem aware or opportunity aware. And in a lot of cases, they aren't quite aware of the lifestyle that they're currently living with their exertion income versus the lifestyle that they might have if they don't build a wealth base. So they could have a 30% cut in income. And how would you feel about that 30% in income? So sometimes it is about just, triggering that, there's something in that, for them in terms of being able to lock in on, I don't want that for me and my family. So if that's something that connects with them in terms of personally, then you'll potentially get lock in. The other thing is, if they're making silly decisions or they're burning cash, you can also potentially show them the consequences, the monetary consequences of that. And so, modeling that is pretty easy to do with our sims. So we're able to sort of show, well, if you keep doing what you're doing, this is the consequence of that. And some of that might be, you're going to have to work another 4 years, to get to the same level that you need to do. Or would you like to work till, 69 as opposed to 65? So some of those are some of the broader triggers. But then, you try and get down to operating on building habits and behaviours, and breaking down those habits and behaviours is a big part about how we also look at it.
Yeah, big time. I feel like that's when you talk about the behaviours, you see that very clearly. The people are diligent, people are just not going to take no for an answer as well. That becomes a real characteristic for me, where they've been told by a broker, for example, it's not possible. They keep going and looking for the answers until they can find the right partner that's going to think big enough for them as well. And I always come back to, I think you're only going to be as true a reflection of success as the team that are on the journey with you as well. I mean, you guys are constantly pushing the boundaries, not resting on your laurels, for example. And I think that's where you probably see that X factor with coming through with someone's team going, that business is growing, that business is developing. And effectively, we can only win when our clients win. Right?
100%.
So you can only win when you're producing great content, more people tuning in. And then off the back of that, it's like, hey, there's a massive ripple effect to be had when you guys are doing well, and you can take people on that journey as well.
But we also want to see people just actually do it. Like, Ben signs off every single week. Knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it.
Yeah.
And we've never we've changed a bunch of stuff all the way throughout the evolution of our podcast, but we've never changed that sign off, and that's deliberate, because at the end of the day, everything that they just listen to is irrelevant if they don't actually do something with it. So the difference between someone who is successful, there is only the success and the non-successful, there's only one common trait. There's a bunch of pathways to get there, but there is only one single common trait, and that is one foot in front of the other. That is it. That's what it boils down to. So we're trying to distill our frameworks in such a way that it's so simple. We try to use metaphors, and we try to use analogies, and we try to give them a framework, and we try to give them a process. And we're constantly trying to distill this gargantuan of an asset class into what do you need to know so that you can actually put one foot in front of the other, which is why I think that the baseline and the fundamentals of what we put at the front of the book is what everyone needs to know, irrespective if you're never going to invest or not, to understand the marketplace that you exist in, which is an essential need, and putting a roof over your head. So I think that's really important. And two, I think it's one of the clues that I think is important is, do you spend less than you earn? Right? And we're laughing and but it's so remarkably uncommon. Like when we shifted from a physical monetary system to a digital monetary system, we just lose the emotion of handing over the $20, and we lose the emotion of the decision that we're making now, because that emotion is actually not in the moment anymore. It's delayed. It's when it comes in the mail or it comes in your email later, and you go, oh, that's right, I bought that dinner. Oh, that's right, I made that purchase. The actual decision and the emotion are now separated. And so therefore people are getting themselves into trouble, and they buy now and pay later and break it up into 4 payments and do whatever it takes to have what I want now and worry about the consequences later. But that's just an endless cycle of chasing tail and violating the number one rule of wealth creation, which is demonstrating on a consistent, regular basis that you can spend less than you earn.
Do you think that comes down to lifestyle creep plays a little bit of that? Mm-hmm. I think sometimes a lack of clarity comes into that as well. Like I think when we spoke about it, a lot of investors for me will balk at the cash flow. Like you buy a property today, 100% lend, 90% lend, for example, you're redlining. Like that property is not going to cover its face. So that's cash flow if you're listening. And I say, I put that in front of them going, you're going to be negative $100, $150 a week sometimes. But then I'll see a motor vehicle lease in there for $1,500 a month, and that car's not going to be worth what it is in 4 or 5 years' time, plus a balloon payment at the end of that. Yeah. And the amount of times I go, that's the car that's killing your borrowing capacity so many times. Yeah. We don't flinch on that. But when it comes to a property that's out of pocket, that becomes a source of contention. And it goes to this point going, how do we shift this perspective to go, this is good debt, this is a good out-of-pocket expense, for example, but it needs to come from somewhere else in order to make this work?
I think fundamentally it's a paradigm game, right? Most of us are trained to work for money, and very few of us have any conversations around having money work for us. And so what you just described then with the car payment and the balloon payment and everything, that's just a symptom of working for money. It's what all of the middle class does. They get a job, they pay the whole mantra of the middle class is to have good credit. Because if I have good credit, I can then go and borrow for a bigger house, I can borrow for a car, I can get on credit cards, I can do store cards. The whole mantra of the middle class is to have good credit. But if you think about we don't like the term rich, but it's poor, middle class, and rich, right? The rich people, they don't work for money. They have their money working for them. So they carve early days. They have a job and they carve a little bit out and they put it into the assets column. And eventually with compounding and time and doing that over a regular period of time, they no longer need the job anymore because their assets are providing the income that they need. So it's actually just a paradigm shift that the majority of us don't make. And the system through which we all come through, which is a schooling system based on the industrial age, it's actually the system is more important than the individual within the system. So the fact that we are all being encouraged to work for money, get into debt, and pay it off as quickly as we can. That's the narrative. That's the mass conversation. So so when we're talking to the clients like that, it's like if you want that, go and have a look what they end up having, and if that's what you're happy with, great. But for us, we're talking to aspiring individuals who want out of middle class. They actually want to move to a position where they are wealthy, defined by the amount of passive income I have coming into my household is greater than the amount of expenses going out. So therefore I can do this for the rest of my life. I am now wealthy. I do not need to trade time for money. I've turned off the active tap and I've now got passive. That's the game.
Right. That is exactly the game. The second you can make that connection, I think we spoke earlier about the successful investors, that they've had that penny drop moment and they've got to do sometimes what the ego does not want to do. And there's this beautiful picture. I saw this here. And when the book comes out, page 137, so you got these lovely little cars here. And you got the luxury, the practical, and the budget. And I can tell you, I have worked my way backwards on that. I had a nice car.
Yeah.
I got rid of it. Servicing wise, I was like, I don't need the lease, and moved to a very practical car that my wife has with the bigger car for the kids, and I have a very budget car. And I can tell clients, I can say to clients, lose the car, lose the lease. I'm saying that because I've done it. I'm sure that you guys have made sacrifices. And I feel like that's a message sometimes that doesn't fly. They're like, guys, just tell us the hotspot to buy in. Just tell us where the location where to buy. Don't tell me about the things like, hey, get rid of the car lease, downgrade the car, for example. Maybe it's on an overseas holiday this year. Maybe it's somewhere local, for example, until you can come out of this stage. I think we talk about, say, young kids, and we've got 2 small daughters who have gone through the daycare or going through daycare expenses where it's like, hey, it's equivalent to private school fees and no one, there's no help. But it's a period in life where it's like, we're not willing to make some sacrifices. Our future self will not thank us for making those hard decisions.
What's the saying that buy the car that your ego
will allow you to
afford? But I think it speaks volumes to the ego. If I'm wearing tracky dacks and a t-shirt and, my net worth's $10 million or whatever, like I don't need to prove to myself, I don't get my validity through how other people see me. I mean, Dr. Gervais on our podcast, great comment, right? In terms of once you can work out that the person that you want to, that gives you permission is you, that's the great rule of mastery in the terms of I don't get my validation from other people. And so if you are trying to keep up with the Joneses and trying to show an image of success and all of that type of thing, if you're comfortable in your own skin and you've got a long-term game that you want to play, then you won't worry about, the car that you're currently driving. I mean, I recently sold, I never told you this, I've sold the Golf station wagon.
Mate, we never thought it would happen.
2011 Golf station wagon. Only because my wife got a new car.
Yeah.
But, we're on the other side of it now, right?
Yep.
So we've done our hard. We did our hard in our 20s and 30s, and so we've got the benefit of that. But, you're going to have to do your hard at some point in terms of making some of those compromises and sacrifice. So now I've got a 2011 Audi. But the point, so it's still not a brand new car, but the point I'm saying
notice your nose was tipping on
the Audi, yeah. But it's still a, dodgy old car that it's a hand-me-down. But again, I don't care. Like I don't, and so if you find those people who can be comfortable that they don't have to have status, and that type of thing, they're pretty comfortable in their own skin. Mm-hmm. And, they're easy to help. The ones that we're talking about here are the ones that have put their permission of success in other people's view of them. That's the work you got to do on yourself to get that right.
We spoke about lifestyle creep, for example, and I'll see this particularly, and we spoke briefly about this before jumping on. A lot of our higher income earners feel a little bit bulletproof. Like I'm talking incomes, 300, 400, 500K above, solid roles, for example. I say they're probably our most riskiest clients because a flick of a pen, a corporate restructure, for example, they find themselves on the outer. It's very hard sometimes to get back into those roles because they're few and far between, and they've got used to playing a household with that level of income coming in. Sure, you might get a redundancy or a payout that might tie you over for a certain time, but if you're out of the market for some time, it's a loss of confidence sometimes to get back into the property market, because it's like we need to build back up our war chest as well, and so you're a little bit kind of gun shy at that point as well. So when you're dealing with higher income earners, how does that conversation change? They'll be going, you need to actually have another source of income outside your day-to-day income, compared to probably, say, our income earners that are capped. And I think you guys have nailed it here with like the list of job families that people, investors. So you had like trades in there, you had teachers, policemen. Their income is certainly capped to a certain level. So they know they have to invest because they've got no other choice. Their back's against the wall. The only way going to build an asset base is by building out a portfolio. Whereas, again, our higher income earners don't have that same impetus to act at this stage, right? So what's your message to them?
Well, I think, again, come back to that gap analysis.
Yep.
So you're living a lifestyle that you love. I'm sure your wife and everyone in the family loves that lifestyle, whether it's a annual trip to Europe or the business class, whatever. You're loving that lifestyle? Okay, so let's model what your current investments will give you when you retire at 60 or 65. Right? And now you're only going to see 30% of that lifestyle, because this is the money you're going to have left. And so, oh no, I'll just keep working. I'll keep it. Well, here's what the stats show, that your peak income will be around 55. And to your point, then you'll be moved on and the next executives will come through and the drop will be significant. The drop will be from 400 or 300, and you'll pick up a 250 or a 230 job, because effectively, the market's telling you that the next generation's coming through and they're going to be around for 10 or 15 years. You're talking about going to a 4-day work week or whatever that looks like. So the businesses will judge that. So if I'm having a practical, honest conversation with those executives, I'm saying, hey, we need to put something in the bank account here that's going to do some heavy lifting for you to be part of that story. Because otherwise, how would you feel if, they become trips to the Gold Coast instead of trips to, South of France or whatever that means? Well, so all of a sudden it becomes really important for them to understand the consequences of that story. And some of them will bite on that, some of them won't. And, unfortunately, the ones who don't, they'll be the ones that, will be working for the rest of their lives and paying off their debts.
Comes down to stacking the pain, right? Because the pain of change has to be less than the pain of staying the same. And so if people, the most dangerous people financially are the ones who have enormous amount of resource, because if they make a mistake this month, they can fix it next month. Yeah. So if you don't stack the pain, I recently had the penny drop that we're actually wired for status. We're not wired for wealth. So if you think about it back in the cave, your wealth was defined by what you could carry, right? Whereas status was your ability to rise up through the tribe. So for the person who is on high income, status is more important than wealth at a headline level. So if you stack the pain and let them know that, because currently what they're doing is they're buying status. They've got a nice house. They've got that south of France. There's a photo on Instagram with the Aperol Spritz in Venice. They've got a beautiful car. Their kids go to private schools. They are winning the status game. So they actually think that they're winning in life. So it requires a stack the pain exercise. Hey, let's have a look at what happens if that income goes away. What happens when you hit retirement and you're no longer as appealing in the marketplace as you are now. Let's actually show you what your so you actually have to future pace them very quickly and stack the pain so that the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, because we know that status is the game that they're playing when they're at that high income level.
Yeah, nicely said. I hope it's a real penny drop for people that are, and I don't think it discriminates based on income, because even again, we were talking before, that middle class that I see is just getting squeezed and squeezed. I've gone on the record saying 250 is the new 100. Like, people that are on 250K do not feel like they're earning $250,000 when you break that down. They would have taken that 5-10 years ago, and now they feel like there's nothing left over. Maybe it's a lifestyle creep, maybe it's a inflation, maybe it's the, like we said, the $1 million home loan. plus the maintenance that comes with the owner occ, plus an occasional holiday, private health insurances. You start to go through, again, we go through cash flow, and you go, right, like any business, there's a lot coming in, but there's not much left over at the end of the day. So how do then people start to then go through, and if it was our business hemorrhaging cash flow, we'd be going, right, strip out expenses, get a bit smarter what's coming in and what's going out as well. But I feel like sometimes the household budget's like just autopilot, and we wouldn't accept that for our businesses, but yet people from a household perspective will just keep playing this like continuous loop of like, we're never actually going to get ahead until we maybe stack the pain, until there's a massive shift or correction in their lifestyle, for example, or they start to get left behind by some peers that were like not doing as well as them. I think that's another one that comes in going, how did they do it? They're not earning as much as us, but somehow they've scooted ahead and bought their second, third, fourth investment property. And now they're starting to play catch up because they've lost maybe 5 to 10 years while the kids have been at private schools, or they've had this period of being in the desert as well.
The biggest transformer in terms of human behavior is something that we don't want our customers to have to go through, and that's trauma. So trauma is the biggest thing that will change radical behavior overnight. But what we're trying to teach people is, don't touch that pot. It's going to get really hot. And then, so finally you walk for 5 or 10 years over there and you touch it, and it's like, and you see these people, old people, don't smoke, kids. Well, you knew that message back when you were 40, but you continue to smoke for another 10. Now you're dying from it. And so if I had my time over, well, you didn't have that trauma event back then, so it didn't change that massive behavior. So coming back to the point you were making before, what we're trying to do is avoid the trauma and try and change some of those behaviors in terms of what that looks like. And for some people, it's just really hard because, to Bryce's point, once you find their trigger, that's going to be a way in which you can hopefully move to say, and you can visualize future trauma, and that can be one way in which to do it. But we want to try and avoid the mistakes, avoid the wipeouts, avoid, from a financial planning point of view, avoid all of those types of things, and just come back to, hey, just do these things well, or take a little bit of that away. So we're not saying take away your lifestyle. I mean, if you want to go to the south of France, can it be every second year for a decade? Then you can go every year again, right? In terms of that, and if you can, I suppose have those trade-offs, hopefully you can move the dial.
Or be just a mercenary on expenses that you don't love spending money on, and make sure that you've got some left over on the things that you do. Like if travel's your thing, or I was saying to Ben before, I just walk into a bookstore, and if I there's a book that I just buy it. Like it's just, that's one of the categories that just lights me up, right? Whereas there's other categories like electricity bills that I'm a mercenary on trying to minimise that. I don't care to give
Turn
them.
the lights off, kids.
I've got an echo of my father. Trust me.
Don't worry, I've got that one too, but I've got that one.
Yeah. Is it Luna Park around here?
Split up like Luna Park. It's all right, boys. Anyway. I'll turn the lights off.
So my kids are getting some of my passed on traumas, but you can simulate. To Ben's point, you can simulate trauma without having to go through it through stacking pain.
Yeah, nice one. Nicely said. Thanks very much. You spoke about having frameworks, and I think the book really covers off some incredible frameworks. I think one that I really loved is the 7 grades of financial well-being as well. Do you want to quickly take listeners through what that looks like?
Yeah, hopefully the bottom 2 you don't want to get into, right? I mean, ultimately that's effectively you falling off the money cliff. But then we want financial stability and financial control. So they're the ones where most of the people that we would be dealing with will have some level of consciousness and control. So they're the main ones. And then when you're moving through that particular program, we move into the stage 6, which is the biggest stage for us, which is around financial peace, right? So, and we added stage 7 really because, from that point of view, you want to have a situation where if you've made it, pay it forward. I mean, we're very blessed. We've been born, or we've migrated to the best country on the planet, right?
Absolutely.
Right now, we've won the lottery. We can still stuff that up, but right now we've won the lottery in terms of what that looks like. So the way in which I like to think about it is when you're going through sort of stage 4, 5, and 6, you're basically getting organised with your money, and then you're getting in control of your money. So the organisation is what's coming in and what's going out. So that's the main piece. Then you're moving up into control, which you've got some type of money system. In our case, we use Money Smarts, which is a rules-based money management system. It's an annualized system that we break down into 12 monthly installments. And we've got a 7-day float, which is all about making sure that you spend what you said you're going to spend. And once that money runs out, you don't go to the well. So you trap that irrational spending or that unconscious overspending that happens. And then from control, you're right, you're starting to line yourself up to possibility and potential. And that's then moves you into that phase of financial peace and then finally into, basically financial contribution.
Excellent. I love that point about pay it forward. Yep. I think it's a massive, it probably doesn't get said enough, but this is, again, what we're trying to do. More investors helping other investors, passing the baton on, for example. I think another part just becomes being a good landlord cannot be understated. I mean, I'm sure you read recently about the rental crisis that's going on and the issues that we're having around poor mental health, well-being. I mean, can you imagine just families having to pick up and move?
All of the things that fall off the back of that.
Correct. And I think we're always chasing yield, and the temptation is to jack up the rent as soon as you physically can. But there's sometimes, I think I had one of the tenants in my property for about 7 years straight. At that point, you're like, the rental increases, they pay on time every single time. Be a good landlord, and just because you can doesn't mean you have to sometimes. When they ask for repairs, I do it. I'm actually, we've all rented at some point, and you've asked for the dishwasher to get fixed or the locks to get fixed, for example. I think there's some parts of the investing journey that just don't get talked about enough. And I think that's probably one of them that really comes to the surface.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about safe and quiet enjoyment. So make sure your asset is safe for your customer, your tenant to basically be in. And quiet enjoyment means that when the light switch flick it turns on, and the dishwasher. So that's that quiet enjoyment, right? So you do those things well for your client. And then it does come down to how you look at, the finances to see whether there's an increment that you can actually put on top of the current level. One of the things that I've been, with all of the reforms that are going on and all of the cost that's coming in, I'm actually starting to talk to everyone about a 4 to 5% is an increase that we should be considering every year to let the market know that if you're going to, if the government keeps putting those costs up, because in some respects that's cost recovery, in terms of, so what we can't do is get ourselves into a situation where we can't ultimately have our asset earning a return that's not comparable to the risk that we're taking. Right. So when you think about, the classic formula, which is effectively a risk-adjusted return, if no risk is 5.5% in a US bond, then we've got to be able to get a better return than that 5.5%, because that's the risk adjustment. Because I'm taking more risk, I've got to get a better return. But fortunately, in some cases, if we're in a financial position where we can say, hey, this year, I know, situations hasn't been great for you and you've been a great tenant. So, I might leave it flat for this year. But I think what we've got to make sure the government understands and the regulators understand, 4 to 5% is where we want to be. Because if you keep taking that cash away from us, we're not actually going to get that return. So there's a balancing act that I think it's important for people to understand. And if the government keep changing the rules, minimum standards, and all of these additional costs that they want to put on us, then I want the market to know that it's 4 and 5%, because in reality, if they then start to think like Ireland has just done something completely crazy, they've capped it at 2%. And so in Ireland, there won't be any private rental accommodation. That market is already a disaster, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. So I think it's important because the government will bring in regulation that sort of talks about just how much you can increase it. And I think a 10% increase or a 15% increase, and even if you haven't moved it for 7 years, there'll still be that pushback. So I just think if we start letting everyone know 4 to 5% is as a nice rule of thumb to start with. And then if you can adjust off the back of that, then I think we'll have a sustainable market in terms of how that sets up for the passive income that we are expecting to earn from the risk and investment that we are taking, whilst our clients also enjoy that safe and quiet enjoyment. And then our obligation is, to your point, keep it up to specs.
Yeah.
Make sure, that I'm not just fixing everything that keeps breaking. When my property inspector goes out there and says, I want you to fix this and fix that, or you need to be aware of this, be proactive rather than reactive, but you've got that money to do it. And I think that's an important message.
Yeah, nicely said. Nicely said. I appreciate that. Thanks very much. And looking through your YouTube, looking through ours, for example, I mean, like I said before,
You got better
guys,
thumbnails than us.
Is that the?
You're a handsome fella on those thumbnails.
Mate, I appreciate that. I'm
Yeah.
going to blush in a second. Thank you, mate. I think what really strikes me is, hey, tell us the location, guys. And sometimes that's such a easy, what's a clickbaity type headline. Hey, buy in, I don't know, where is it now? Darwin or Melbourne, for example. And these are the markets to be buying in. And that's what will generate and garner views. But there's something to be said about, hey, mate, like you said, put one foot in front of the other. Play the long game. The intelligent investor, that location may not be right for you depending on where you are, the entry point, where you are in your journey, for example, the yields that you're looking for. So that's not the answer, but that's probably the answer that people think they need to hear. How do you keep someone on the path to go, hey, mate, one foot in front of the other? You got a chart in there that's like, it's a nice linear approach, but in reality, it does like ups and downs, for example. And the long-term gain is where you probably get that sweet spot holding on for a bit of a longer-term approach. How do you keep people on the path, for example, Bryce?
Well, we're very, very strong advocates of people paper trading their life. So getting super clear on what their North Star is and then actually building a roadmap to get that. So we keep people on track through the roadmap. It's like the analogy that we like to use. We use it in the book. Google Maps, right? If we're here in Sydney, in North Sydney, and I want to get home to Torquay, I just put it into the map, and that's where I am. That's where I want to be. But the what's interesting is I might want to go to Bondi for lunch on the way home, or I might want to go down the coast road, or I might want to go the quickest way, or I might want to drop into relatives along the way home. And I think if we define where we are and where we want to be, and all of those sort of navigations along the way, then it's buy-in. We've all got the vision. Everyone's really clear on where we're going.
Yeah.
And then all the decisions are made on science. Then we take the mystery out. There's no guesswork here. And when you have that conversation where someone doesn't want to have $150 out of pocket, but they've got that car over here, we go, we've actually factored in the 150 and look how we've done it. And look what it looks like when you do that to keep them on track. So we're very much of the view that the conversation starts with a 5-step process, which we talk about in the book. Step number 3 is the plan. So if we clarify, evaluate up front so that we can build a robust plan, then implement and then manage. Most people start step 4. Let's get on the portals and start buying.
Yeah.
We're backing the truck up. We're going, whoa. Let's actually start here. The conversation doesn't start with you at the mortgage broker. It doesn't start with me at the buyer's agent. It doesn't start with the property manager. It starts way back at the beginning with the qualified property investment advisor who says, so what do you want? What's important to you? This is where you are. This is where you want to be. What's the gap and how do we fill it? That's how we keep the client on track.
Yeah, and I think, if we could tell you that it's really simple in buying 2 or 3 really good properties in concert with your super, would you trade property? Would you speculate in property? Would you do all of the developments? Will you take away all of that family time and lifestyle time that you have aside? I mean, if you're having that initial conversation with your client, I would think most of them would opt for the easiest path and the path of least resistance, which is the passive path as opposed to the active path. If it can get them to their desired destination, which for a lot of people, do you know what that is? Just what they've got now. Like that they know that they've got financial security. For a lot of people, it's like, am I going to be able to continue the lifestyle that I'm enjoying today?
Yeah.
And so part of that would be then, if you're going to be a property trader, then we're going to have a completely different strategy than what we're going to have if you're going to be a buy and hold. And so a property trader right now, absolutely you'd be looking at Darwin, and then you'd be looking at, okay, what type of vehicle would you be looking at? Well, you'd be looking at a vehicle that has the best tax outcomes for you in the short term.
Yeah.
So you might be looking at a structured investment as opposed to in your personal name, as an example, right? Without giving any advice. So it's really about, sort of saying, well, what am I trying to do here? Now, if you are a long-term investor, the answer is simple and it's in the book and we unpack it in a lot of detail. but it's economic activity, human interest, and human behaviour. And then once you get under the layers of those types of things, and you see what we mean about future economic activity is putting pressure on the land value, and you want that to be sustained for decades, not for years, because that's what's going to keep pushing the value higher. That's where your answer will be.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think you've summed it up really well there, Ben. I think it kind of comes back to your ABCD framework. Effectively, that's how I feel it boils down to. If you just want to take people listening to it, how do you go ABCDs? I think the goal is to make it sound elementary.
So it's asset selection, borrowing power, cash flow management, and defence. But the order you go in is cash flow, then borrowing, then asset selection and defence. Yeah. So that's, it's an easy framework to remember, but the sequencing of it is really important.
Okay. Take me through the sequencing. So people listening, why is the cash flow so critical at the start? Obviously, we spoke about it. You can't grow into a level of like cash flow pain, for example, but it's almost like what's going on under the hood that you need to know. Hey, where do we need to shift the deck chairs a little bit?
Well, I mean, and the case studies in the book are awesome for really going deep on those. But in simple terms, trap the surplus. Okay, so we've got that surplus, and it's that surplus that gives us our borrowing power. So to your point around the car loan, so if we were able to roll that car loan or, reduce that commitment, that monthly commitment, we can borrow more, right? In terms of, so they're the exercises you do. You look at the surplus cash flow, which then lends itself into, okay, what's my borrowing capacity? And then what you want to be doing is you don't want to just be looking at your cash flow here and now. What's happening in the next 2, 3, 5 years? Because property, speculating and trading property, that's a high risk, high reward game. But even for 5 years, it's still, that's very short term in the buy and hold journey when we're thinking about decades. So is there going to be any impact to your cash flow? Are you going to go down to one income because you're starting a family? Are there going to be higher school fees that kick in that then put a real squeeze in terms of those household cash flows? Once you model that out, you can then sequence to optimizing what that purchase price will be. And through that optimization, that will also, when it comes down to asset selection, you'll start thinking about the yield and the growth, what's the combination of the yield and growth. And you want that to sort of balance out around 9.5. Okay. Anything above that, and you're artificially inflating the models, and you want to be careful of that because you can make any model sing. If you put a 9 or a 10 or a 12 or a 13% annual return on them, they go to the moon really quickly, and that's unrealistic. So you want to be conservative in that sense. And then that just informs purchase price with my yield and growth. And then you go hunting for that type of asset that can sustain that type of return over the long term. And then you put the defense in behind it, which is the insurances on you, because at the moment you carry that portfolio through your exertion income. So we want income protection, trauma, life, TPD, those types of things, especially if you're, with a family. If you're a single man or woman, you don't need those types of protections in there, because at the end of the day, property will wash itself out, and there won't be any risk associated with that. But they are the main ones, and of course, the tenant protections as well, in terms of making sure that you're insuring the tenant risk.
Spot on. Nicely said. I think that defense part, again, we speak about the parts that maybe fly under the radar. Yeah. So you can have those conversations. It's like, we'll get to it later. And it's like,
it's their money, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's that's the humbling responsibility that we get. People come to us with their money, and what we might do with our own money shouldn't be what we do with other people's money. Our lives and what we're trying to achieve is completely different. That's why I'm a bit frustrated with some of the marketers out there at the moment, in terms of selling an aggressive strategy when it's not their money. You play with, if you want to blow up your strategy, and that's fine, but when it's somebody else's money, you've got a far greater responsibility to look after their money. So that should never be lost on people that have the privilege to serve those customers with their money.
Nicely said. What's an aggressive strategy that you've seen that's got to be in your let's get this little vein going?
Well, I think that the main one is that, trying to buy 3 or 4 properties really quickly, and using, potentially different types of structures and access to capital that maybe, someone in their early 30s or late 20s shouldn't be getting access to, because they don't even know the power of their portfolio and the compounding risk of debt. Only one of those things needs to go bad to have a roll-on effect. And so we might still say that there's there's less risk associated with having them in entities because, at the end of the day, there's asset protection to me personally.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're still signing usually on guarantees and obligations to service that debt. Like the banks normally don't give you much grace in that respect. So I just think it speculates the market and hyper inflates the market. That's why, we got the GFC off the back of no doc loans and low doc loans, right? Because immature investors who really, they were enthusiastic amateurs were going gang-ho into those particular markets. That's not a property market we want in this country. And the unintended consequences of that is we potentially get further regulation and further, breaks on all of us in terms of how we potentially invest for those clients. So I think it's really important that the property market has a sustainable growth path, not this sort of pump and dump type path that we're potentially on. And it's off the back of some of the regulations we're also seeing, as well as some very aggressive strategies around, different entities in terms of how we're setting up to win.
I think our podcasts and our books have played a role in democratizing what the information is that the property investors need. So we're very strong on off the plan and greenfield estates, right?
Yep.
So that's now part of the investment narrative. So, but now within the established lane, so that was the first evolution of spruiker activity. We're getting concerned that now within the established lane, there's an element of spruiker activity. So now they flip to the right asset class, but then putting people into dangerous spaces. And we wrote in the book, it's about margin of safety, and everyone's got their favorite Warren Buffett quote. But one of the ones we put in the book was Warren says, if you've got a truck that's 9,800 tons and it's about to cross the river and you're about to enter a bridge that only has a capacity of 10,000 tons, maybe go down into town and go and find another bridge that's got a capacity of 15,000 tons so that you've got a better margin of safety. And so that's what we would say to the new age of what we foresee is spruiker type behavior, is the margin of safety that they're offering to their clients is very slim. And to Ben's point, we take really responsibly the agency relationship we have on behalf of clients. If you want to go and you want to go and be aggressive in your own name, which is to Ben's point, they're fine. Knock yourself out. But when you're an agency relationship on behalf of someone else, you need to take that responsibility more seriously than some of the behavior that we're observing.
Mm-hmm. It's a bit like that message of buy in this location, like buy as many as you can is something that lands or resonates a lot with a lot of people. It's like, I can do this very quickly, for example, at breakneck.
It's not our first rodeo, isn't it, Aaron? So the point, I've seen countless stories in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, and then in the 2010s, where they have quick win, and then so they rinse and repeat. And then they want to get their hands on more capital, more borrowings to go again. And then, boom, a black swan event happens. So the GFC wiped out a lot of those aggressive guys who are gearing themselves and putting everything into different structures to just try and get more, because they're invincible.
But the newer age investor didn't go through that. Like I was very young. I was very early stage of my career around the GFC, but no one at 35 went through that.
No.
They were probably still at school. So they didn't experience that level of pain. And you're going, hey, man, what about happened in 2008? Like, pain.
Yeah.
Old news.
Yeah, that was Mum and Dad's problem.
What about the interest only slowdown in, like, was it 2014, for example? Weren't around there.
Yeah.
When you're at the coalface of lending, like that really hampered a lot of investors' abilities to scale. And when they had limits on how much investment lending they were doing, or the rate differentials, for example, then you take the borrowing capacity shifts and the amount of changes that happen in lending. So people that were able to build portfolios then or accelerate pretty quickly, it's a very different type of game that we're playing today. But now it's like equity, rinse, repeat, pull it out, go again. There's a speed element that's probably coming into it, going buy as quickly as you can, sub 500s, for example. Yeah. I don't have any problems with the price point. People buy where they can and afford to. But I think what you're saying is the little bit of irresponsibility that maybe comes with it.
Well, the irresponsibility is they get someone into a suburb, because buyers agents do have the ability to influence the market. So they get someone at this price point.
Which is an incredible responsibility when you actually get back a second, isn't
100%.
it? Yeah.
But some people don't take that. They see it as a marketing opportunity, because they get them in at this price point and they get clients in along the ladder. And then eventually this last client comes in. And so what this client purchased and what this last, there's a 29% difference. So then that 29% difference becomes the marketing angle, right? But it's only the first person who got in that got the 29%. The last person who got in arguably is in negative equity. So it's that irresponsible sort of concentration risk that we're seeing that we're trying to shine a light on.
Interesting.
And then the regulators also have some responsibility here as well. Like the 3% buffer rate, when interest rates are coming down, they are forcing buyers, investors into the affordable price point, because that's all, that's the maximum borrowing power they can get based on the settings, the levers that the governments are pulling. And so that has unintended consequences. The unintended consequences is first home buyers who want to get into the market. Well, you are competing with more investors than you need to be. Whereas, before we had that and we had potentially a 1 or a 1.5 or a 2, those buyers might have been preferred to buy, a better location at a higher price point, not the entry-level price point that now all of these investors are coming into and artificially inflating those prices. So the consequences are, on first home buyers are being impacted by that. And so that's where the regulators also need to make sure that they're held accountable in terms of how they have the settings, the mechanics of the market, they're influencing that as well.
Yeah, nicely said. Just to wrap up, there's that last section of the book you guys touched on, which is all your case studies. That's probably where a lot of people, I wouldn't say flick to at the start, but for me, I just sat there reading these just going, yeah, this is why there's different strategies. I'll take you through a couple. You have rent investors, dinks, so double income, no kids, for example. People have young families. People have older kids at private schools, and then you have empty nesters. Each of those clients buying investment properties, but a very different game plan and strategy and sit behind that, which is why whenever we're talking, it's don't look or compare or compete where you are in your journey to someone else. Someone that has bought their family home and sat on a huge amount of equity and their kids have finally moved out and now buying an investment property are going to have a very different strategy to 30-something rent investors that are priced out of a capital city and now looking to buy in emerging markets, for example, with a view that they may build a portfolio, sell that down, eventually buy their own home. So you've got to understand sometimes there's a method to the madness, but you can't see that when you're comparing or competing to other investors as well, right? Which you guys are in the driver's seat to say that, yeah.
And if you're competing at the Olympics and you're a 100-meter sprinter, your training regime is different to competing at the Olympics and you're about to run the marathon, right? It seems really obvious because you're doing different games. But then you transfer that into money and everyone sees us all training for the same event. It's like, no, some of us are sprinters, some of us are marathon runners, some of us are javelin throwers. Like there is so many games being played in the money game, but we all just project onto others that we're playing the same game. So whenever you get differences of opinion, it's usually just two people with different time horizons talking over each other. So it's just being super clear on time, target, income and expense to me, time, target, income and expense to you, everyone else that we're talking about, because then we get clear on what the journey is. And then it doesn't matter, oh, you're on that journey, cool, I'm on this journey over here. It's like that makes total sense for you.
Yeah, but I'm over here going, no, you got to be into like developments and duplexes. But you're over there going, no, you got to be in flipping. And then Ben's over there going, no, mate, you got to be into like granny flats or commercial.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, it's like whose voice is a little bit the loudest on the right asset class going, hang on, dial this back. What do you need? What do you want? But also the confines are, if you're 5'2", you're not playing basketball, for example. So
not in the NBA.
Yeah, correct, right? Or the Olympics. And it's going, well, hang on, you got to deal like, so your income will, exactly to your point, your income may determine your strategy. For example, where you are in your life will determine your strategy. The means and the ability. Some people have access to a bank of mum and dad. Unfair advantage, but it's an advantage. You got to take it, use what you have. So I think for us, it's probably a really good way to kind of wrap this up, to go read the case studies, learn about where you are in life, have a chat to a really good quality team of advisors. What's the blueprint that you need? And I think even when you're investing as a couple, you need to have the same blueprint to kind of build your house on, because you cannot build a house with two different floor plans and blueprints, says us with our significant others going, yes, absolutely. You need to get on the same page financially, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, well said, mate. Absolutely well said.
Guys, I want to say thank you very much. Like I said, tip my hat to you guys. I think even when I used to get onto the Qantas flight and you guys are like the podcast on a Qantas, I'm like, mate, kudos to you guys. Like I'd listen to every episode. For me, that built a lot of my knowledge, my foundation, being in broking, For a lot of listeners, that's probably where they started. Look at the Phil Tarrants, Smart Property Investment. You guys really paving that way, and I think now you said there's no shortage of property podcasts. There's no shortage of YouTube channels on property. There's no shortage of books, for example. But what doesn't go out of fashion is quality. And I think your message is absolute quality. It stood the test of time. That's why you've reiterated 2.0. So, mate, well done to you guys.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for having us
Appreciate
on.
it, mate.
Appreciate that. Like I said, the boys aren't here to farm or fish for business. Empower Wealth is an absolute juggernaut. But I think what they're really passionate about is how does this book get into your hands to retire with $3,000 a week? And if you're keen, we'll have a couple of books to give away. Is that put you on the spot?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. We'll have a couple of copies to give out. So drop us a message if you want a book. Otherwise, they'll be on shelves. When are we expecting?
They're out.
They're out now?
Yeah.
We just recently had a book launch in Sydney at the Dimmick store in George Street, which
Fantastic.
was a lot of fun. But mate, they can get it at all good bookstores now.
Beautiful. Guys, thanks very much for being here. I look forward to seeing your journey continue and you guys shooting the lights out. Well done. Thanks very much.
Thank you, mate.
That's a wrap for another episode. If you know someone that loves to build that 3,000K net passive income, share this episode with them. Get that ripple effect bigger and stronger, and we'll talk to you next time.